Welcome to our first Inns of Court meeting for the fall of 2020. For those of you that don't recognize me without a suit on and with this facial hair, I'm still Judge Washington. I'm still the president of the Lopardo Inn, and it's still my great pleasure to welcome you all here. What we usually do at the beginning is we have any guests stand up and introduce themselves. We're not going to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and turn to our membership chair, Eric Norville, to talk about the two members that have joined our inn for the first time this year and share any concerns he has. So Eric, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Judge Washington. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting. Is my audio all right? Can you hear me okay? All right, great. Well, we have two new members beginning this year. Dominic Severance, who is a graduate of the UC Davis School of Law and is with G10 Gallupo Law, is joining, as well as Morgan Small, who is with the Skaja Daniels firm in Escondido. They came on over the summer. We currently have, by my account, 64 active members in the inns in the Lopardo chapter. We are actively always promoting individuals to come on as members going forward. So I would say if you have, co-counsel, opposing counsel, people in your office that might be interested, invite them to come in as guests. That's what happened a few years ago with me. And Susan Kern invited me to come in, and I did, and I've been here ever since. Going forward, if anyone has any questions about membership, feel free to contact me. My email is enorvell@norvellfirm.com, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. And that's really about it for now. If anyone has any questions, any of the panelists, anyone on chat, by all means, please, feel free to speak out, and welcome back.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And let me turn it next to our treasurer, Randy Ortlieb, to talk about where we are in our financial position. Randy?
Thank you, Judge Washington. We are doing well financially. Our reserves are approximately $39,000 at this time. We had a $5,500 surplus from the last term. That's due mainly to the fact that we missed 3 meetings that would normally have cost us about $2,000 to do the catering. And so we are in discussions now in the executive committee as to what adjustments might be made to the dues for this term. So stay tuned for a billing announcement in that regard. It looks like right now we do not have a green light. We have a red light still, not even a yellow light from the Carlsbad Senior Center where we meet. And so until we have a yellow light or green light, we're not going to be able to meet there. So we will not be incurring catering costs or room rental costs at that facility. So we're just trying to do a little predicting, and we'll send out invoices after we've made our decision in that regard.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, Randy. And to follow up with that, what we're going through in the inn is very similar to what the court's gone through with all the uncertainty that's taken place this year. For those of you that remember what it's like to be at the Carlsbad Senior Center, try to imagine us in that space and all staying 6 feet apart. It doesn't really work for us. Likewise, the fact that all of our meals prior to our meetings were all buffet style, again, that's been discouraged by all the health officials to have that type of setup. So we're trying to figure out exactly what the challenge is going to be in trying to create something that looked very similar to how we met previously, but still keeps us safe as we move forward. And I know in talks with Judge Oxney, that's been exactly her concern with the courts, that not only do we move forward, but we keep everybody safe while we do that. Before I get to our panelists, I want to thank Lou Storrow for being the tech guy behind the scenes that's been setting this up and handling all this for all of us. As you know, we're not very experienced as an inn in doing remote meetings. And so we don't have all those things that some firms have or the court might have, which is a separate account that allows us to do all this. So Lou was gracious enough to take the lead on this, to say, I'll be responsible for setting this up. I'll make it sure that the panelists get the right information so they can log in and get on the panel, that the rest of the in members get the right information so that they can log in. And he's quietly behind the scenes doing that. So I want to thank Lou for doing that. I also want to thank another person whose name's on the screen, Bill Kamanjaran, who's been behind the scenes tirelessly trying to help us navigate our way into this new unknown year of training for the Inn. And so, Bill, I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to say to the group, but I just wanted to take time out to personally thank you, and thank you on behalf of the Inn for all the work that you've done, still trying to put the teams together, put the program together, so that even in the midst of this pandemic, we can continue the mission of the Inn as we move forward. So, Bill, if you're there, if you want to say something, you can. I'll turn it over to you now. If not, I'll go ahead and move on to the panelists. And I don't see Bill saying anything. So with that, let me turn it over to the three panelists. And there are three people that I know really well, and I'm really excited to have them with us this evening to talk about the place where I work all the time, the court. So you're going to hear from our presiding judge, Lorna Oxney. She's going to talk about not just the court globally in San Diego County and what challenges we face and the strategies we've used to overcome those, but also some of the things that are going to take place specifically up here in North County. Then we've got our own supervising judge from North County, my supervising judge, Judge Sim Von Kalinowski. He's going to talk again more specifically about what's going on here in North County and how we're going to implement some of the things that Judge Oxney is going to talk about. And finally, you're going to hear from Mike Roddy, who's the CEO. He's the executive officer for our courts. He's the man that's behind the scenes tirelessly working to make sure that we can accomplish the things we're trying to accomplish. I know a lot of people think that it's judges that run the courthouse, and in some regard, that's indeed true. But in a real sense, there needs to be people behind the scenes that are handling with all the personnel matters, the budget matters, the hiring and firing and staffing concerns that we have, because as some of you I think already know, or maybe have thought of, during this pandemic, it's had a financial impact, not just for the state of California, but specifically for the court here in San Diego. As a result of that, we've had to make some tough decisions. And one of the things that all the judges that work on our court executive committee appreciate is that we've got somebody as talented as Mike Roddy, who's been through some of these financial crises before, who knows what challenges they present and knows the strategies that best navigate us through that. So you might be hearing as months go by that we've had to make some choices. We've offered some employees some opportunities to retire early so that decreases our personnel costs, our budget costs. You'll hear that some employees are being asked to take some furlough days and to further decrease those costs. We might be in a position where we're going to need to limit some services in the future. But those are the strategies that we've developed, not just with Mike, but our whole executive team, to help us navigate this very unpredictable, unexpected, unprecedented challenge that we faced in 2020 with this COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm really excited to listen to them. You've heard enough from me. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judge Oxney. Welcome.
Thank you very much. A couple of things. One, I want to say I'm a president of the Wallace Inn, so I really appreciate the Inn and having us here and knowing the struggles that you're going through. I'm going through it too in my Inn. Whether you charge dues or not, how you deal with meetings, where do you meet, how do you reinstate education, how do you get credit, all those things I'm dealing with at the Wallace Inn. That said, I'm willing to come speak to your Inn anytime to tell you guys what's happening. Anytime that I can be available, I'm willing to do it. But more importantly, Judge Washington, I really appreciate you singling out Judge Mike Roddy for what he does for our court. I think a lot of lawyers think that judges run the court. And
wait, is he a judge now?
I want him to be. But judges really don't run the court. Judges run judges. And Mike Roddy runs operations, and we are a huge operation, a very large employer in this community. We have over 1,200 employees, or we used to anyway, and comes with that HR and all the things that you would know in a big company, whether you represent a big company, you work in a big company, you're involved with that. we run a very large company, but judges don't run it. Our CEO does. So when he does have that knowledge and experience to tell you about those things, and I appreciate you recognizing Mike Roddy for what he does. Obviously, Judge Velkanowski runs the Vista Court, and that's a difficult job, but it's not quite as difficult as Mike Roddy's, I will tell you. So where were we? In March 17th, when I closed the courts, we were operating 154 departments. Then we went down to 0, except for ex parte and emergency temporary restraining orders. And now we've creeped back up with the opening of the courts, and starting tomorrow, we're going to be at 112. So I'm very proud that we've been able to do almost all of that remotely. We've sent out jury summons. We're going to start our first criminal jury trial in October. It's yet to be seen how many people will actually show for jury service. But tomorrow the court in Vista will be open for admission for the ground floor. And that I sent you that material about services that we're going to start. And I think that was sent to you, services that will be starting tomorrow. Business office services, rather than having them in the lobby, countywide, that will start tomorrow. In addition, on the criminal side, starting tomorrow, there'll be walk-up courts, or ability for litigants that are out of custody to walk into the courthouse and make an appearance remotely, rather than appearing on the telephone or rather than appearing on their home computer. Potentially they don't have one. And so we've started that service tomorrow. We're already doing family law trials remotely. I know there were some questions about family law, and I'm happy to take any of them. I'm pretty involved in most of the decisions. I would say my weakness might be probate, but I can answer any questions or get you the answer to any questions that you have. One of the things that you've all said, and one of the questions that was submitted to us, is when will we be open for jury trials in civil? Probably not till 2021. I think we've talked about that, and I've given news articles about it. And let me tell you why. We're summoning 900 jurors for October 9th. I don't know how many will show up, but even if, or they're going to be appearing by telephonic standby. But even if 70 show up, we're going to use all 70 for that criminal trial. And I'm not going to have any overflow jurors, because every time I have jurors, I'm going to set another criminal trial. We have over 2,000 criminal trials that need to be heard, and we need to focus on the ones that are out of custody. Another one of the questions that somebody asked is, what are we going to do with preference trials? And preference trials are an issue. And if there is a true preference trial and I have excess jurors, that'll be something that we'll have to work on. But I doubt that I'll have the excess jurors, and I think that the court could find good cause to continue those trials until we have enough jurors. So we are in the process of doing the jury summons. We have all the family law departments up and running. We have all the civil law and motion departments up and running. We have probate up and running. We have all the walk-in requests that you need. And starting tomorrow, you'll be able to actually go see somebody in the business office, rather than, if you need a case file, you go to the kiosk or the triage desk and ask for it. You'll be able to go in and go to the business office like you would. So there's some semblance of normal. What's not normal? 4 people in an elevator, 2 people in a bathroom, no drinking fountains, no water, no cafeteria services. Everybody has to wear a mask. Everybody comes into the courthouse and has to have their temperature taken, and all the CDC questions are asked. The plexiglass is up in every business office. It'll be before anybody appears in court. It'll be in all the courtrooms. In Central is the only place we're doing. We're going to be doing jury trials. We've got what we call a plexiglass civil courtroom, or courtroom. It'll be used for criminal in the beginning, and each of the jurors' seats has a box around it to keep them safe from the person to the right and to the left. They'll still all have to wear masks. The judge's bench will be encircled. The court reporter will be have protection. The witness will be protected. The clerk will be protected. Nobody will be walking up to the bench for a sidebar. How is that all going to work? Your guess is as good as mine. We're working on some of those things. Say, for example, if you're in a criminal case or a civil case and you want to stipulate to the admission of a certain exhibit, how are you going to do that? You can't go over to the lawyer next to you and whisper in their ear, right? You got to stay 6 feet apart. Or are we going to be doing those sidebars in advance before the jury comes in? Are lawyers going to be allowed to text in the courtroom? These are all things that we're working on, and we're going to come up with a plan, but it's all absolutely new. So the services we're using in civil, we're using court call. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that we should be offering free appearances. And so in November, we're going to have MS Teams in every civil courtroom in the county, and you'll be able to have your hearings for free. So you'll be able to log in. So I would encourage you to get MS Teams if you don't have it already. If you have Microsoft, you probably already have it. The San Diego Superior Court had it. We knew we had it, but never had turned it on. The public defender had it, the sheriff had it, the district attorney had it, and now probate is going to be using it, civil is going to be using it, family is already using it. If you want to see how it works, you can go on the court's website and click on any of the family law departments in either Vista or Central, East County or South, and you can actually watch a live hearing, and you can see what's happening, and you can see how it works. Now, is it perfect? No, there's tape delay. If you watch an interview on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, there's tape delay, and you can see that sometimes there's interruption, etc. So do we have to get used to it? Yes. Is there some problems with interpreters and using it, MS Teams? Of course, it's not as easy. But it's something where we're able to continue to move cases through the justice system in a safe way, and that's my goal, and it's been my goal since the beginning of this. So I'm going to let Roddy talk about what the workload is like in the budget, and then I'll be here to answer any questions, but I don't want to tell you stuff that you've already heard because I've done so many bar events, so many criminal defense events. I don't want to repeat stuff. I want you guys to be able to have a affirmative discourse, but I did want to tell you about the exciting news that tomorrow we are reopening every courthouse, but limitedly. You can't go up to the courtrooms, and you can't appear in courtrooms, but at least you can do some of the court business that you need to do inside.
Great. Thank you so much, Judge Oxney, for that. Let me turn now to Mike Roddy to talk about where we are as operations of the San Diego courts. Mike.
Judge, thank you, Judge Oxney. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to be the downer part of the presentation. I'll just tell you that right up front. Generally, what I have to talk about is not fun or pleasant or positive, because that seems to be the nature of where we are this year. But I would like to give you some idea of what's happening here in San Diego. There were some great questions that I think really can frame the conversation. So, for example, the first question that we had is, how do court filings this year compare to the same period last year, 2019? We've taken two cuts at that. We took a look at the last quarter of our fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we looked at the period of April, May, and June, which comprises the last quarter of our fiscal year. And to give you some idea of the impact that we saw over the same period, April, May, and June of 2019, felony filings were down 47%. Misdemeanor filings were down 52%. Traffic infractions were down 55%. Limited civil cases were down 64%. Unlawful detainers were down 88%. Small claims, 66%. Unlimited civil, 24%. Probate, 34%. DVTROs, surprisingly, or maybe not, were only down 6%. Overall, during that 3-month period, 2020 versus 2019, our workload was down 51%. And that really is the experience we have heard from other courts as well. And that contributed to, in the course of our fiscal year, about a 17% reduction in workload. A lot of that occurring over the last 3 months. Interestingly enough, I did a little what if, and I said, well, if during that 3-month period, filings had remained flat, had remained unchanged, how would we have ended the year? We would have been down 2.2%. So we went from being down about 2% to being down 17% for the year and being down 51% for the quarter. And many of you might say, well, what did you guys do? Well, we did a lot of the planning, and so much planning has gone into the things that Judge Oxney and Judge Von Kalinowski are going to talk about, because there is no playbook for this, and we had to basically learn as we went. And going from essentially 0 courtroom technology to 112 courtrooms on Monday is quite a feat. And we could talk about that for a long time. But needless to say, we have been decreasing over the last 10 or 12 years. That's a statewide phenomenon. Most trial court filings are down. But it's very clear in our analysis that the COVID situation really took a chunk out of our work during this 3-month period. What do we see going forward is we're seeing some rebound in some areas. For example, family law. We're seeing filings come in at a higher rate than normal, which probably means that some of these cases are catching up to that hiatus period or that lack of access period that we had in the last quarter. Some numbers don't seem to be going up very much at all. And that may be, well, a change in the community, a change in how the system is used, could be a shift in processing from justice partner agencies. It's something we're really going to be looking at going forward, because at the end of the day, our filings basically determine what our budget's going to be. And that's part of the statewide filing system that all the trial courts in our 58 counties are subject to. So some of you have asked, well, what effect did all this have on court operations? Well, as has already been explained, we've moved over 100 courtrooms to remote access technology or video technology. We've been having to shift employees into different areas around the court because, again, family law is coming back, or restraining orders, civil harassment cases are coming back faster than, of course, misdemeanors at this point. So we're going to be looking going forward about how we allocate the resources, because the patterns that we historically saw are not normal at this point. And we're going to have to continue that as we continue to expand access. So as Judge Oxney indicated, starting tomorrow, we're going to be dealing with out of custody misdemeanor and felony defendants. That's going to be a new part of our work. We're going to have to shift our resources to try and accommodate. So it's going to be a bit of a dance for us, but we've got all hands on deck to do that. It would be much better to do this in a good budget. And the question is, how does our budget this year compared to, say, last year? And our budget is not good. We really had not even recovered from the Great Recession 12 years ago. And in January, I know Judge Oxney was looking forward to having a few extra $1 million to spend. That was the original proposed budget from the governor. And you may know, but just to let you know, we are a state-funded agency. So we pay attention to the governor and the legislature very closely. But when the pandemic hit and the state economy cratered, so did revenues and therefore the budget. And you've read a lot about that. You probably don't hear too much about the courts unless you read the Daily Journal or the Recorder. But the trial courts here in California did take a hit. It was an unexpected hit, of course, because we were expecting to be made whole. But at the end of the day, we had to reduce our budget by nearly $15 million. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it's about 7.5%. Okay, big deal, 7.5%. But if you take a look at some of the information that hopefully got out to you before this meeting, we have a chart on revenues and expenditures. And basically this hit threw us back about 4 years. It threw us back to the place we were about 4 years ago. And as I said a bit earlier, if you go back even further, Our budget is actually 10% less than it was in 2008 at the start of the Great Recession. So in real, unadjusted dollar terms, dollar for dollar, our budget is 10% less today than it was 12 years ago. Now, I can tell you our workload may be down, but it's not down that much. What that means, since over 80% of our budget is people, and the remaining expenses are for goods and services that are often mandated, like forensics evaluations, there really isn't much room to maneuver. So another chart that I threw into your materials is a chart that looks at our employee headcount by fiscal year. It's a 10-year perspective. And as you can see, we're headed down to about 1,132 employees. That's our current headcount, which is the lowest we have ever been in the recorded history of the Unified Superior Municipal Court. And by way of comparison, at the start of the recession, we had close to 1,600 employees. So we're currently operating the court with 1,132 employees. So that's obviously going to mean something. In the preceding years, it of course meant cuts in services, closing probate courts, closing civil courts, closing juvenile courts, closing criminal courts, judges without clerks, eliminating court reporters and family law, some of those things. Unfortunately, we've reached a point where I think as a court, the continued reduction or elimination of services really isn't in the cards because there's just not much left. We're beyond bone. And so what we did to accommodate this $15 million cut is we instituted our fourth early retirement separation program. And we've also been very liberal at permitting employees who have coronavirus family care issues to request extended furlough periods. Well, that cut 84 or 85 people right out immediately from the court. And as with all of these programs, our most experienced employees are the first ones to go out the door. So we have a very young workforce, a workforce, nearly half of our employees have been with the court less than 5 years. So there's a tremendous loss of talent and expertise that we're training to. Fewer employees. And since we're not actually eliminating services, what you're going to see are backlogs, longer lines, longer waits, and delays. Now, a lot of that has been masked here in these intervening months because we really haven't been operating at full speed. If we were to open the court under normal circumstances with all 150 departments tomorrow, we could not staff them all at one time. So we're going to be looking at our workforce. We're going to be looking at the shifts in workload as we go forward. But we are in difficult straits. We have already been told by the governor. Oh, and by the way, not only did we eliminate employees, but all of our employees are on a mandatory 10-day work furlough, which they have to take between now and the end of the year. That again is consistent with other courts. Some courts have had as many as 26 days and others are in the 10 to 12 to 15 range. So you're seeing that across California as the governor cut a significant chunk of money out of the budget there in the late revise. We've also been told to expect about a 5% cut next year. So we're already beginning to talk about what steps can we take next year to look at another few $1 million in cuts. Unless the state economy improves, unless state revenues improve, that probably is our future for the short term. And so I think, again, you will see diminished services, you will see reduced services, you will see delays. What does that mean for the Vista Courthouse? Again, we look at balancing all of our courthouses based on workload, and we go through the formula that the state uses to fund us. And we're beginning that process, but Vista will see the same impacts that we will see in Central, that we will see in East, that we will see in South, and so forth. So that's yet to unfold as we get into the new year and see where our caseloads go. There was a question about, are we going to ever restore the probate department in Vista? As I'm fond of telling Judge Oxney, yes, when the Beatles get back together. In other words, not very likely, given our current budget situation, because that would mean, an additional department. We did reopen and resume clerical services out of Vista, so you can now file, access, maintain your probate documents through the Vista clerk's office. But beyond that, our best hope is probably an expansion or a continuation of the remote hearing technology that we're currently using, so that you could conduct probate hearings with the parties in Vista and the judge in Central. That may likely be, we've been experimenting before the COVID situation, we were experimenting in that in family support cases with great success, where the family support commissioner was in Central and the parties would show up to a court facility in Vista, and we were conducting the court hearings through that mechanism. We're likely to begin pushing that type of technology even more, and maybe even in more areas as we go forward. We've probably progressed more in the area of video courtroom technology in the last 15 weeks than we would have thought about in the last 15 years. And that, frankly, is the experience from colleagues that I've talked to across the country. That which was impossible is now happening every day. So I think because of the lack of necessary and appropriate staff, people resources, you're going to see us continuing to try to leverage technology, to leverage online services, because that really is the only way forward. I can't see in the near term that we're going to get the money we need to restore the positions that will allow us to provide the services the way that we all want to do that. So we're going to continue to struggle through that, and I'm just being honest with you about the potential impacts. Just a couple of other quick notes from questions that you all have asked, and I see there's a chat question, and I'll get to it in just a second. How large is the criminal backlog of cases, countywide and in Vista? Our current estimate is that we have about 700 plus felony trials cases ready for trial. We have over 2,000 misdemeanor cases ready for trial. So that's about 2,700. Of those numbers, 150 felonies in Vista and about 950 misdemeanors in Vista as well. The other question we received is, how large is the civil backlog of cases? As of 6 p.m. this evening, there were 2,837 civil cases ready for trial in the Central Division and 765 civil cases ready for trial in North County. So all told, about 3,600 cases on the civil side that are listed as ready for trial. So it's going to be some process to try to work through that, and that, of course, will involve our judges and our judicial leadership. But it's a pretty daunting task when you consider that before COVID, we were doing in sum total in all categories countywide about 1,000 trials a year. So with 3,700 civil trials and 2,700 criminal trials, even if we were to do them at the rate of 1,000 a year and nothing new came in the door, it would take us 3 years to figure out how to get rid of that backlog. So I'm kind of a numbers guy as well, and I don't want to make it too maudlin, but that just gives you some idea of what we're up against on the court side. I guess before I turn it over to Judge Von Kalinowski, there was a question about losing the trailer in North County. There's no movement on our part. I don't know where that rumor came from other than it's out there. But at this point, we're not moving, changing, or ending anything in any of the branch courts until we settle our operation situation down here in the COVID era. And so with that, what I'll do is stop. I appreciate you listening. Hopefully there's a few tidbits of information, and turn the time over to Judge Von Kalinowski.
And before we go to him, and I see Judge Oxney is back now,
Yeah.
so I'll let you go first, and then I'll make some comments about Mike Roddy.
So I just wanted to answer a question that I didn't answer before, is what can you do to help? And this is a countywide question, or a countywide answer. As Mike Roddy said, leverage technology, e-file. One of the things that's coming in civil is a way to file a motion by not calling the IC calendar clerk, but instead, you know how we instituted the status conference when we reopened and you guys could get on calendar and set hearings to get in front of the judge. Well, we're going to take that and turn it into a way to file a motion. And you'll have 3 days or 5 days, I can't remember what Judge Trapp is going to do, to file your motion once you reserve a date. But it'll eliminate the need for your staff to call the IC clerk to reserve a date, and you'll be able to do it online. And we need to leverage technology because we are going to have fewer employees doing more work. And you as practitioners understand when you have fewer employees doing more work, you need to leverage technology. So, you know, make your appearances by MS Teams so you can leverage your work or use Court Call, whichever one you want. Be patient with staff. I know that a lot of lawyers have said to me, well, or judges have said to me, why can't we just do one trial in that department? We're ready to go. The judge is ready to go. And you haven't let us do it. And that is true. But once we start having hearings in courtrooms, there's all sorts of other things that have to happen. More plexiglass has to go up. Protocols for cleaning have to go up. 25%, you know, or less people in the building, someone's got to count those people. Defendants have to be transported into the from the jail to the courthouse. It's going to spiral out of control once we start doing in-person hearings. And the concern is that somebody is going to get sick, and then we're going to have to either do a mistrial or send everybody home. It's happened in all sorts of courts up and down the state. And so the more we can do remotely, the more efficiently we can do it remotely is what we're looking for. So I just ask all of you to bear with us for 2020, and now it looks like 2021, and we will do whatever we can to get your case resolved. We have lawyers on the civil side, on the criminal side, on the family, or judges, I'm sorry, on the civil side, criminal side, family law side, probate side, that are willing to do settlement conferences, that are willing to do IDCs for civil, that are willing to just have chats with you by MS Teams to try to settle your cases. There's all sorts of other resources in the community that are trying to resolve cases, but this needs to be kind of a one-off where 2020 and 2021, we can't go back to business the way we did it. Otherwise, I mean, there's just too many cases. So I would say, unless you have any particular questions of me, all I ask is be patient and use technology.
Thanks, Judge Oxney. And I just wanted to add one thing to what Judge Oxney was talking about, what people can do. And one of the things I would encourage people to do is, please don't spread rumors about what you might have heard from someone who's not in court leadership about what might be happening with the court. I know it's easy to want to do that, to share that little bit of gossip, but then it whips around and suddenly people have got this whole idea that the court is or isn't doing something that we have no intention to do. So one of the things that's true, and it's been true this entire pandemic for Judge Oxney and Mike Roddy and Mike Smith from downtown, is they've been willing to come to anybody that wants to hear and be able to take questions and answer questions and give information from the top so that people can hear directly rather than, well, I heard from a clerk who heard from a bailiff who heard from somebody that stands outside the courthouse that the court is doing this or that. So if you've got some rumors that you've heard that you're like, I don't know if this is true or not, ask Judge Kalinowski, ask me, send an email to Judge Oxney or Mike Roddy and say, I heard this, can you admit or deny? In part because there's been a lot of brainstorming that's gone on during this because there is no playbook for this. And there's nobody we could go to. We can't go to LA or Orange or someone else and go, well, the last time the pandemic happened, what did you guys do? None of those people exist. So everybody has a different idea of what the court should or shouldn't be doing. I know our neighboring counties aren't doing exactly what we're doing. And so some of you that practice in other counties are going, oh my gosh, well in Riverside, here's what we're doing. Or in San Bernardino, they're doing this. Recognize that San Diego's different, always will be, always has been, but ask us directly what's going on. So that's part of what this evening's about. And I finally just wanted to comment from Mike Roddy again, because I've been with him enough to know that he doesn't really look forward to being the person that has to go around year after year to explain, well, the budget this year doesn't look particularly good either. He's been doing that since at least 2008 when we went through the Great Recession, and we had just thought we were getting out of that cycle. We had changed governors. We had a governor that seemed a bit more inclined to put some state funding behind the courts, something we've talked about in our inn for a number of years now. And then the pandemic struck. And so as he mentioned, we're a state-funded entity. And so what you see and hear Governor Newsom talking about has a direct impact on us. When businesses are shut, that impacts their tax basis. So he's got less revenues coming into the state. He's going to make cuts. And people often don't think about the impact on the court directly. But some of you have seen that. We've released people from jail that otherwise we might have kept in jail. There's been a new recent ruling about what's going on with the whole issue about setting bail for people and doing that. And finally, the last point that he made is our staffing is not nearly as experienced as it was when I got on the bench 7 years ago. What he just said was remarkable to me. Half the people that work at the courthouse were not working at the courthouse when I got sworn in 2013, which doesn't seem like that long ago. So we're dealing with that because we've got relatively new people having to do something that no one could have trained them to do. Because we've never had to do that. We've never had entities not be able to file information for months at a time. And so we're all working through that. So again, as Judge Oxley says, be patient. And with that, let me turn it over to Judge Von Kalinowski. Judge Von Kalinowski, tell us what's happening in Vista.
All right, well, greetings from the Vista Courthouse. I'm actually still here. And if you suddenly see it go dark in here and me waving my arm, it's because my lights turn off every once in a while. So it's not because I'm trying to get your attention or anything. But I wanted to just give you an overview of what Vista is doing with our video courts here. And we have, out of 27 active departments that we had pre-COVID, 21 of those now have video hearing capabilities. The ones that don't, there's one of our traffic arraignment departments doesn't, it's not in session, and some of our criminal departments don't either for obvious reasons since we're not being able to do trials. But with those, we also have two additional rooms that are being used as what we call the audiovisual access room, or AVAR, where people can come in, and we have one for criminal, one for limited civil, where they can come in and appear and be beamed into a courtroom. And one thing, though, I wanted to emphasize on that is we would prefer for those if people have the ability to beam in from their home computer, from their phones, to do that and not come into court. That really is just for those who just don't have any other access, that those are there. We would prefer people not come in if they have some other way to do it. But we have a total of 6 video departments for criminal. 4 of those are triage departments for in-custody cases. One's an overflow for triage. And in the in-custody triage departments, we can do everything in a criminal case from arraignment to sentencing except trials. And that obviously is the one thing we can't do there. We have one felony in-custody sentencing or readiness department, and there go my lights. Let me see if I can get them. Oh, well, I've got one spotlight on me, so we'll continue with that.
We're trying to save money, Judge Von Kalinowski.
That's it. That's apparently, after a certain time, it won't let me turn the lights back on. So we do have the one felony sentencing department. It's in custody. And then, as you heard from Judge Oxley, that we have the starting the out of custody department tomorrow with the hooked up AVAR department with that. For the future here, we're hoping to get some additional AVAR departments to expand our capabilities, to have people in other departments, because we can only beam them into one department at a time. You can't change channels on those. Starting in October, we're going to be having status conferences on out of custody cases that did not have their preliminary hearing before the shutdown. Then also in October, we're starting with misdemeanor readiness conferences for fax arraignments. It started in mid-June. And then in November, we're going to be starting with out-of-custody arraignments. By that point, we're hoping to actually have some of our departments back in their normal locations and using some of the trial departments for the triage departments. In family law, you heard that we're already up and functioning at full force. With that, all 5 of our departments are doing everything that they did pre-COVID. They're just doing it by video, all Microsoft Teams. And we actually added 2 additional departments to try and help deal with the backlog, and in particular, the long cause matters. We had about 3 criminal judges who were previous family law judges who volunteered to help out and do long cause matters for us. And we have a commissioner who was previously a family law commissioner who also volunteered to do long cause matters. And so we had those 2 departments up and running. Unfortunately, due to the shortage of family law trained clerks that you've heard about, those are going to be shutting down a week from Friday. And so just one of them will continue on Fridays only with what its pre-COVID function was, which is domestic violence restraining orders. For civil, that, as you heard, they're all up and functioning at full, my lights, up and functioning at full speed. They're using court call and will be going to Microsoft Teams. And they've covered everything. They don't have any backlog there anymore, except for the trials, which you heard about. Limited civil started up in August, and it has a backlog of limited civil cases that it is working its way through. That uses Microsoft Teams, and it does have one of the AVAR rooms available. Our civil harassment restraining orders are being done by Microsoft Teams, and there, pre-COVID, we just did that 1 day a week on Fridays. And since that reopened in mid-July, we've been running that department 5 days a week. We have 2 judges who alternate between them, between the department and doing the walk-ins. And we were able to get through our backlog in 5 weeks doing that, handling about 70 cases a week, where pre-COVID we were doing about 20 cases a week. One interesting thing that's happened there that we've noticed since we got through the backlog, so for the last 5 weeks, all the new filings, we're doing about 60 cases a week, where for 2019, the first 2 weeks of 2020, we were doing 20. So we've got triple the number of civil harassment cases going on now. So we're going to have to monitor that to see whether or not we may need to make adjustments in how we handle that department. In juvenile, we started doing the adoption calendars in August, and Judge Elias, amongst one of the many things that he does that as well. So he handles those couple days a week before he does his criminal calendars, and he used the Microsoft Teams for that. And then dependency started here in Vista at the end of July, although it was being handled out of juvenile for North County prior to that. And then with the traffic, that also started in mid-July for the traffic trials, again by Microsoft Teams with people logging in. And as I said earlier, we aren't running any arraignments at this point. And then I just wanted to make a comment about probate. Before COVID, we had been looking at working with downtown and our probate judges was seeing about getting set up to do probate by video starting somewhere in late April was the hope. And under that, the litigants would show up here and be beamed downtown to where the judge and staff was. We actually have it better now than that, because now they can be beamed in from their offices and their homes instead of having to come in here. So we actually have, I think that's an advantage over what we have, and you aren't getting the same use of probate that you would anyplace else right now. So I think that's one of the positives that we've had. You know, and just to kind of echo some of the things that have been said, there are a number of things here through the use of video that hopefully we will carry on because they seem to be much more efficient in some areas. And so to the extent we can do that, we've learned a lot during this, and that would be something that would be very beneficial. And so with that, that's all that I've got here from Vista.
I've got some follow-up comments, Judge Washington, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I want to make sure that the lawyers know that When we access Microsoft Teams in the civil departments, probate and in civil, we're not going to be excluding court call. So if somebody has a relationship with court call, they want to use that, they want to pay to appear in the court, we're not going to stop them from doing that. It's actually easier for our clerks to have that because court call runs the calendar. But until such time as the court opens up and allows lawyers to walk in to make a 5-minute appearance, I feel very strongly, and the management team feels equally strong, that to pay for access to justice is not the right decision. And we're not violating any California rule of court because we're doing it by internet, not by telephone. And Los Angeles has gone to something they are charging. We will not be charging for the court call appearances. We're doing settlement conferences. The MS Teams appearances. We're not going to be charging for settlement conferences by MS Teams. We have all gotten facile with having multiple rooms, just like the private mediators are. So if you want a civil settlement conference and you want it to be done by a judge, we have a list of 10 judges that on the website that can do that, and you call their department. I'm one of them. I'm sure all the civil judges in North are equally doing them to help out, and there's 5 or 6 judges in Central that are willing to do civil settlement conferences as well. The good news for Vista is that our plan, but it's only a plan and don't hold me to it, and I'm sure Mike Roddy is going to cringe when I say this, we want to start jury trials in Vista before the end of the year. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not, but I'm trying. I'm shooting for December. Obviously in Central, we're starting them in October, and that's because we have a jury lounge that can accommodate 70 people. And we can then pick from that 70 and send them up to an extra large courtroom in batches of 25 to get 12 jurors and some alternates with the plexiglass courtroom. We don't have that anywhere else, and we're not going to roll that out anywhere else until we see if it works in Central. But even if it does work in Central, we won't have the capacity to have those large groups come into Vista or South County or East County. So we're working on Judge Smith, who's the assistant presiding judge, is in charge of coming up with a plan for Vista. I know he's going up to meet with Judge Val Kalinowski on Monday, now that we've got a plan for Central. So in a perfect world, Vista would have a criminal jury trial or 2 in December. That's not very many when you think of our backlog, and that doesn't help civil. I have told the civil judges, and I've told the other inns and or any groups that I speak to, that I'm hoping to have bench trials in civil in October or November. So we'll be rolling that out, socially distanced, mask wearing, plexiglass courtrooms, with everybody socially distanced, but with the lawyers in the courthouse rather than on Microsoft Teams. I understand, I was a civil IC judge, and I understand that it's hard to present a case with your key piece of evidence being on a shared screen. And so we are going to work very hard the next 2 months to be able to get you guys into court to do your bench trials. That's the most that I think you can take back to your clients, that the court's trying, but we have an ultimate goal in San Diego to keep everybody safe. That includes the litigants, the judges, the deputies, the clerks, the witnesses, the court staff, and the defendants and or respondents, petitioners, etc. And so we have done that in the 6 months that we have been under the COVID pandemic. We've only had 11 employees get COVID, no judges, and no deaths that we know of, contrary to other courts. I've had deaths of lawyers, etc. And so we're trying very hard to be safe. And so again, I guess I can end this with, please be patient with us.
Thank you, Judge Oxley. And I just want to talk a little bit about a couple of things that were raised by our panelists. One, they've all talked about the fact that we've got these video hookups in most of our courtrooms now. And one of the things I just wanted to remind people is, if you've ever had problems with your personal computer or your work computer, understand what the court is likely to face as we go through this. Because one of the things that's true is, when we first open back up, especially in North County, we only opened up with a handful of courtrooms. And so it was easy because we had the IT staff available to be in courtrooms, to sit with judges and clerks to make sure everything was working perfectly. It's going to be a lot harder. We don't have 130 IT people to sit around as we open 130 courtrooms that are exclusively handling their work through technology now. And so, again, that's one of the things to be patient about, is the fact that this is an equipment that we've used for years, that everybody's familiar with. We hadn't purchased it because, as it was mentioned, we didn't think there was necessarily a need for that. We didn't think there was the budget for it, frankly. And so that's another thing that we had to spend money on that we weren't anticipating we'd have to spend money on. Our IT people were able to kind of cobble together some things from different vendors to create the video carts that we have in our courtrooms now, because the people that have the all-in-one assemblies didn't have any available for us, because everybody wanted video equipment at the same time. So that's the other thing they're dealing with in IT, trying to use a new system that they haven't used before, with a bunch of judges and clerks that had never used it before. Now with litigants getting more and more involved in that haven't used it before. So I think I mentioned a couple months ago at our IN meeting when we talked about technology, if you can get to a place with your internet connection is wired rather than on Wi-Fi, that's usually better. We don't get that glitching, we don't get that freezing. I've talked to a number of our family law judges about that very fact, that they're in the middle of a hearing and suddenly one of the litigants just freezes. Well, as a judge, you don't just get to keep going on. You can't reach out to them because their image is frozen on the screen. And so if you've got clients, our recommendation is try to put them in the office where you are, so that at least the two of you are on the same connection and we know where to contact them. Because sometimes, although we have the ability to do those hearings remotely and they can stay in their own home and do whatever they're doing, if something goes wrong with that, then the entire hearing stops, because someone's got to figure out how to connect with them and get them back on the hearing. And so, again, be mindful of that. The other thing that Mike Roddy talked about, and if those of you that weren't really facile with the numbers there, he's talking about 1,100 criminal trials in North County that we've already missed. That doesn't count all the defendants that have trials coming up in the next couple of months. And so if you do the math on that, even if we were doing a trial a day for a year, that's 250 trials that we would do. And that's a trial a day. Well, we've never done that many trials. And it would still take us 4 years just to take care of the backlog. So we're in unprecedented times. And for those of you that have civil cases, you already know what the drill is. The civil comes after criminal. And so we're going to have to figure out how to deal with this backlog. I, along with Judge Simmons, Judge Moak, and Judge Von Kalinowski, are working to try to decrease that backlog by either settling cases or continuing them out into 2021. I'll start doing that from the bench tomorrow when we start this new rotation of cases through that we hadn't dealt with for 6 months, since March 17th. So again, you're going to hear a familiar refrain from all of us. It's be patient, be thoughtful. If you've got some suggestions on what the court's doing or not doing that you think might make us more efficient, feel free to share that with Judge Oxney or Judge Von Kalinowski or myself, or frankly, any of the judges. The word will trickle up to the people that can make some decisions that make us run a little bit better. But be mindful of the fact that, above all, there aren't any of these cases that any of us believe anyone's life should be placed at risk in order to resolve. And so if your thought is, well, why didn't they bring my case in before this other case? Probably because we didn't believe it was safe to do so yet. Because we've seen our colleagues up and down the state make different decisions, and sometimes with disastrous results. So we're not there yet, but it's created a backlog for us, not just in criminal, but in the rest of the court. We're going to be working hard to get the criminal cases out of the way, because then we can breathe some life into the rest of our caseload. What you've heard is, if you want a trial, it's probably going to be next year at the soonest, whether it's criminal or civil. I hear Judge Oxney say she'd like to do a trial in North County before the end of the year. My experience as the criminal presiding judge is defense attorneys and prosecutors don't really want to go to trial in December. Jurors don't really want to come in and serve. And especially with so much unknown about the pandemic, that's not typically the best time to have jurors come in and say, you know, right before the holidays, I want to see if I can connect this COVID-19 and then take it to my family so I can celebrate, or be quarantined from my family because I got to sit in on your civil case or your misdemeanor or felony jury trial. So it's unlikely that there's going to be much concern about that. Here's a question from the group. This question is, and I'll give it to Judge Von Kalinowski or Judge Oxney, has there been any discussion about virtual settlement conferences for civil?
Yes, I thought I just said that. You want a virtual settlement conference for civil, just call your civil judge and get assigned out, or go on the website and find them. We have the ability to use MS Teams. It's got chat, it's got different rooms. I've done them. And just like the private judges that are doing them, you have the plaintiff in one room, you have a joint room, and you have the respondent in another. It's very efficient, settled a lot of cases. Judge Enright, Judge Barton, Judge Cayeti are doing it downtown. Judge Casserly has indicated he wants to do it in Vista. I was in IC, I'll do it anytime that I have time available. The judges in chambers. And we would be happy to accommodate. And if you need a civil settlement conference, reach out and we'll find you one for free.
Thank you, Judge Oxney. Here's another question from the chat. Has there been any timeline contemplated for ministerial issuance of a summons for a residential UD at time of filing of the complaint, like days of yore?
Well, we were gearing up to issue, and we had a task force, we had training. We were going to be ready to do UD trials in October and November and December to catch up. And then the legislature stepped in and said, no trials through January. And so we are not, the only trials that we're able to do are pre-COVID-19 jury trials and post pre-March they were already set for trial that have nothing to do with COVID-19. Commercial UDs that are not, then there's some quirk in the law, and I'm not an expert on UDs, so don't quote me, but there's about 40 of them that are going to go next week that are commercial UDs. And then there are ongoing, the ability to do a UD for things that are other than the non-payment of rent, public health, et cetera, that will potentially go forward, that have been able to go forward since COVID-19 actually, and since the moratorium was issued.
All right, thank you. Here's another question from the chat. What is the best way to get an unopposed application of good faith settlement order entered at the time, after the time period has run? In a civil case? Yes.
SIM? I mean, other than going ex parte, I guess that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, since I haven't done civil in many years, I can't answer any better than you.
Yeah, I haven't done it in many years either, but what I would suggest is go ex parte. But I'm not giving legal advice, but.
Well, and for our colleagues on the bench, they always appreciate when someone says, go ex parte.
Right.
So,
well, what I have heard in civil, and is that the civil judges all have ex parte hours every single day. And they are not, at least the ones downtown, are not getting that many requests for it. So there may be an opportunity right now to go ex parte more often than you could when it's a regular time. But if you have a case assigned, a judge assigned, I would reach out to them, because this is pandemic law. We're all trying to do things a little differently. And some of those rules about don't ever go ex parte, it's got to be this or that, just are relaxed a little teeny bit. And I will tell you that the criminal judges that are in Vista and all over the county, they're not just sitting around doing anything, not doing nothing. They're sitting in, helping out in UD ex partes. They're doing civil harassment. They're hearing family law cases. They're stepping in to do family law trials. They're hearing temporary restraining orders. We're all pitching in, trying to help out and get these cases moved through the system.
I agree, and I was being a bit humorous there, but the reality is that for all of the judges that have cases specifically assigned to them, the thing they want is to somehow close those cases out with a judgment or a final order or something that resolves it so that gets out of the way. All of us have a backlog. So anything that you can do to contact your judge and say, hey, judge, on this case, we've received a agreement on this, or we'd like to file this that's going to resolve the case. I would imagine that most of our colleagues are going to be willing to sit and listen to that and go, oh, okay. Does that mean there's one less case that I have to worry about dealing with going forward? Great. Thank you so much for taking care of that. So again, we're going to encourage you to be creative about how you can handle the cases, because we're trying to do so much more, including things that we've never done before with so much less. You know, when you think about, wow, I wish we could go back 12 years ago to where we had 1,600 court employees, because sometimes it's just as simple as, why aren't we hearing more cases a day? Well, someone's got to pull those files. Someone has to prepare those dockets. Someone has to do all that work. It's all labor intensive, and we just have a lot less labor than we've ever had. And so that's part of the concern. If you look at, well, why aren't they doing more? We've really thought about and tried to strategize who can do what work. As you've heard mentioned, some of our clerks have taken some time off for COVID-related issues, including either concerns of their own or their family members. We had, during the summer, a number of clerks that took time off because they needed to be home with children that they didn't have childcare for because there was no camps to send them to or things they might have done in the past. Some clerks still in that position because the schools are virtual, which means the kids are still at home, which means someone's got to look after those kids. And so we're not anywhere near fully staffed. And even fully staffed, we're nowhere near the numbers we'd like to be at to do the work that's in front of us. And so the sad part is, in many ways, the judges are still here, but hopefully part of the story that you're getting tonight is the judges don't do all the work. We do the presiding over the cases when they're in the courtroom, but aside from that, there's somebody else behind the scenes doing all this work. And so we're doing our best to try to get done. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. I know we're about at a little over an hour for this meeting, which is about the time we usually would spend. So I want to thank everybody for being a part of this. I want to thank our panelists for being with us. Judge Lorna Oxney, our presiding judge, Judge Sim von Kalinowski, our supervising judge for North County, and Mike Roddy, the CEO of operations for San Diego Superior Court. We're going to probably get used to doing this and seeing each other this way for a while. I know next month we're going to do another Zoom meeting, so tell your friends that it still works. We still get great information exchange, and that's so much a part of what this learning process is from the ends of court. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this. Stay safe out there. Wear your mask. Keep a safe distance away from each other, and we'll see you in a month. Thank you all.